Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Warcraft news, where pre-patch has been out for a few days. I'm sure you've all enjoyed the queues. Pre-patch has not been without its teething problems, but it sure does seem that the end of Battle for Azeroth has actually got people pretty damn engaged. And on that, we've got another data mined cinematic to do a quick breakdown of. And of course, in more somber news, the strike situation at Blizzard's European HQ in France, where things seem far less than good. But yes, overall, for the WoW players, Battle for Azeroth is, technically speaking, over. And that is quite something to say indeed, just like, also quite something, this month's Patreon. The Rogue Pins, they finally arrived in the office, so there's that. We are, of course, doing these old classic favorites as a special, and also, we've got the regular art as well. Oh, it's quite something, it's quite a lot. So that's this month. Your support has been incredible. You have literally created 2 new jobs that we've since filled on the team. That's pretty awesome, and it's really going to help the content. So, thank you very much, and let's go. Alright, pre-patch has launched, and yeah, people were memeing, at least in day one, the queues, right? The queue actually said 3 weeks at one point when you counted down the hours. That, of course, is not normal. Today it was about 5 minutes for EU Ravencrest, and there you go, the patch is there. It's actually nice to see, like, WoW with queues because people want to play. I think that's pretty cool. And even on our side, when it came to the content that we were producing, I mean, man, it was really overperforming our expectations, which does kind of make you think, oh, people are actually engaged in World of Warcraft. There were so many times during BFA, we would be modeling, like trying to work out, you know, what would the performance videos be, and it would be lowballing, right? And in reality, it would be under what we would think. So it's nice to actually have gameplay-oriented content that does really damn well. That's obviously nice for us, but more importantly, it actually shows there's a hunger to consume WoW content that is about playing the game instead of just meta news. And that is so nice to see. Now, let's talk a bit about the launch. So, once the servers turned on, there were quite a few bugs. Just in the office, Jared, we saw him. He was in Stormwind. He had a working chat box, and he couldn't move. So, he didn't really get to play that much pre-patch in that instance. But really, though, there's been widespread issues. There's characters not being found. There's disconnects. I think some world servers going down. The usual load-based things. And this is something where I did see a whole bunch of people being like, oh, wow, with Bobby Kotick's salary, you could buy more WoW servers. And criticisms of Bobby Kotick's compensation, of course, aside, often with stuff like this, it's far less that Blizzard don't have the number of servers. If they could just throw more servers at the problem, the server engineers would get the problem solved. It's more a thing of peak load being the problem rather than overall capacity, generally speaking. So that's what will have caused those things to happen. Now, of course, past that, there have been teething problems, things that maybe have not been picked up. So some world mob scaling seems to be a little bit wild. This was pointed out to me by Nightstalker on Twitter, who is extremely good at noticing things like this. So like BFA elite world mobs just have too much health right now. And at the same time, Wowhead reported people noticing that N'Zoth's paranoia was, relatively speaking, doing 3 times the damage that it should. This is the sort of stuff that's pretty easy to miss on a PTR, so I imagine it will be hotfixed pretty quickly. But, I mean, there are funny issues. I'll list some of them. Some people have their eyeballs missing. Typical. Avatar, sometimes that just doesn't exist till you reload. That's Avatar the Warrior ability. Sometimes people's mounts have been missing for the PvP ones. You can get, you can log in like Jared and just be totally stuck. You can have your authenticator-based bag space be gone, and probably more things. What does it overall mean? Well, could it be a slightly rushed out PTR? It could be, but also there are lots of things that don't get caught till they're literally tested by millions who are playing the game in a realistic scenario where they actually care about the character they're playing on. Plus, sometimes issues just do not arise in a test environment, so that's probably what's up. But overall, people seem to be mega hyped that it's no longer Battle for Azeroth, that they can mess around the endgame content of BFA, not really have to deal with BFA systems, and just have a bit of fun. And I would say especially leveling up new characters. I mean, that pretty much is the main thing that you can do at this stage anyway, and it certainly seems like a lot of people are pretty excited to do that. Now, basically, then, I think it means that, yes, Shadowlands concerns that the likes of myself and Preach have been voicing, those are very real, but right now they don't really impact the average person. So this sort of performance is roughly, I'd say it's sort of what I would expect. Maybe it's doing a little bit better than I thought, and that certainly is a good thing to be surprised by. Now, that said, there have been a few odd changes. some things we didn't notice or sort of know about beforehand. I think some actually did just crop up whenever it went live. So you now can't change the difficulty while you're inside an instance. Now, this was basically used, it seems like that this is something that is designed to curb people using legacy loot mode to basically do a slightly convoluted method of mount farming a bit faster. So this actually knocks out that method. So there is that. Then also, in addition to the transmogrifications changes that we know about, there's one pretty nice one. People have found out that all expansions bar Shadowlands can be transmogged at level 10. That's pretty nice for when you're getting your new character full of heirlooms and ready to level, so I like that quite a bit. Then also, as reported by Wowhead, some people found out how to skip the Warlords of Draenor intro by basically getting the quest from Chromie, and the breadcrumb that is, and then dropping it, and then just manually walking through the Dark Portal, where what that would do is take you to Shanmoon Valley and Frostfire Ridge. Now that's a cool bit of knowledge, but I'm here to tell you, it's a terrible idea, do not do it. If you are leveling the Warlords of Draenor introduction sequence, while we've all done it 700 million times, it does have really good XP per hour. It's got an efficient layout. You'll get like 5 levels while you're doing that, which, considering you've only got normal mount speed within that level range, is super fast. And also, skipping this will mean that you actually miss out on a key early breakpoint for your leveling speed that was a lot of the crux of what I mentioned in my leveling guide. So you can do that if you just want to skip it, but if you want to level fast, it is a terrible idea to skip it. So there you go. That is the pre-patch. It is now out. Let's, though, talk about the road to launch. The Shadowlands beta is probably on polish and tune mode now, and certainly one of Ian's recent tweets did mention this, where he basically was talking about a lot of the main focus being balancing class abilities for the pre-patch launch, and then balancing other things, after the pre-patch comes out, which really just does indicate that they're in those final stages. That was specifically, I believe, in the context of PvP trinkets, which happen to be super overpowered in some cases on the beta. So that's what's up from Ian, and I think that's what we can expect from beta over the next while. Probably not much more in the way of big moves and changes, probably more just balance, polish, iteration, which, iteration and balance that is, which I think is probably where it should be. No matter what design we end up getting, I think it's good that it is bug-free and that what's there is actually balanced. Now, in terms of other things, the zombie part of the pre-patch event, which also, of course, will come along with the Ice Crown-based event, that's probably... Okay, I'd say that stage of the pre-patch is probably only good for like 2 to 3 weeks. Especially the zombie part. I mean, the ICC event where you're getting your gear and doing all that, that can exist on live for ages, but if World of Warcraft is a zombie apocalypse for an entire month, then it obviously wouldn't work out that well. So I do imagine the Blizzard will basically let the current version of pre-patch that you have right now be up until nearly the end of this calendar month, and then I think they will do the events for perhaps 3 weeks, and then will intend to launch Shadowlands the last week of November. I do think, though, that the first week of December is also possible, but I think anything later than that is probably not what they want to do. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one of them is if they end up having a cacophony of issues, they don't want that to be running up to when holiday time is going to be starting for their staff. Also, if it came out in the first week of December, then 2 weeks later would be normal and heroic raid release? And then after that would be mythic. That would be really kind of awkward, actually, because you have a whole bunch of that raiding going on during Christmas, and often there are just situations there where Blizz, they need to be live fixing things while the raid is actually going on. So I really doubt that stuff is going to be happening when a whole bunch of people are going to have paid time off, for their jobs. So they probably won't do that, but there is the slight thing of releasing it but then delaying the raid content. Well, that will actually mean that more in-game progression happens before the raids come out. And I mean specifically here in regards to legendaries, where 3 or 4 more weeks of farming Soul Ash is a pretty big deal. Conduits, of course, for their unlocks, and then renown progression, which is, of course, tied to your Soulbind. So with all of that stuff, it could actually throw off some of their initial balancing targets if they end up having to, relatively speaking, delay the launch of the raids in comparison to the actual expansion launch. So personally, I'm expecting that they are going to be pushing hard to hit the end of November. And that's probably how it's going to be. Perhaps if some raiding stuff is going on during when people are off, Maybe some people will just get some optional, maybe double time overtime, right? Something like that. Not entirely sure how that would work out. So there you go. I think that's roughly what we should be expecting for the launch of Shadowlands. Yes, it will be a little bit of a pinch having to wait just that extra bit longer, but we'll try to keep you tided over with a whole bunch of content on what is going on. And speaking of that, something very interesting has been noticed. So PvP scaling was a thing in Battle for Azeroth where basically they would get your character and they just smoosh the mats and smash you together, and sort of having better gear was an advantage, just that sometimes you actually would get an advantage for not having better gear than your opponent, and the entire thing was full of quirks that could lead to the creative use of game mechanics, as of course exemplified by Rextroy, who I've finally pronounced correctly on a video. You will have seen his big series of videos that were basically just he was just busting the game and destroying people. It was very fun to watch, but it did highlight a core issue that I think really was damaging for, not just damaging for PvP. I think a lot of people, there's been this experimentation with Blizz of how to balance PvP. I remember they had the stat profiles, which then would get scaled up based on your item level. I think that was during Legion. Then in BFA, they just did scaling, and I think the devs explained it via a tweet that was basically just like, you're here, the enemy's here, we balance it a bit. Just that it didn't always do that. So basically, this was a bit of a silly system. I can understand why they wanted to do it, but overall, I do think that World of Warcraft is a loot-driven game, and I think people would find PvP a lot more exciting if they could do some PvP to get a bigger axe, so that they could then use that axe to kill people harder in PvP. That really wasn't there as much, so I think this is something that will be pretty good. Now that said, does this now mean that PvP is a pillar of World of Warcraft? Well, it might be for the Arena World Championship and for the people who enjoy doing PvP, but I will definitely say, as a bit of a PvP normie myself, well, I'd like some new battlegrounds, I'd like some new, stuff that's kind of fun, maybe some new content instead of just another few seasons of progression, and I will say, I think the lack of new PvP content is pretty unacceptable, and I don't know how it's been like this for 10 years, where Blizzard have just been completely slacking on PvP. I mean, I guess they just had a situation where there's a bunch of people who play WoW and they hate PvP, absolutely. So then Blizzard just decided, that's it, we're not going to do any more Battlegrounds. They probably realized that Epic Battlegrounds are a spectacle, but a bit of a mess to play, so they probably decided to axe the Epic Battlegrounds mostly. And then they just found that, people weren't that interested in regular Battlegrounds, and because RBGs are not a massively popular thing, therefore they didn't think it was worth developing more Battlegrounds, but I don't know, instead we just got PvP brawls and stuff, which were cool, but I thought they would be an experiment that would go somewhere, and they sort of haven't. What's going on with PvP? I would kind of like to do some more PvP, I probably will in this next expansion, but I would really like to see more of a concerted effort there on the PvP content. Next up, it's time to shed a tear for Gan Greymane, who, as always, has been kind of sidelined. We'll get on to that. But yes, the pre-patch in-game cinematic has been dynamite. If you do not want those spoilers and you want to experience it yourself, just zoom on to the next chapter of this video. Look at the little playback bar thingy. That's where the chapters are. So you can do that. Okay, Bolvar. He got thwacked, and he's carried out by Nazgrim and Whitemane. Now, I will say it's interesting that both Nazgrim and Whitemane got, CG tier models. I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, those characters, of course, were, they were resurrected up by the Death Knight High Lord during Legion. Pretty fun set of quests, actually. So they are there. Them being CG models now, I don't really think that indicates they'll be doing too much in the future. I don't know. Maybe they'll join us in the Shadowlands somehow, but I don't think they'll be that important. Anyway, okay. So he gets dragged out and he just does his monologue while the camera zooms around the place. So he says he knew Sylvanas would come, but that he thought she would claim the helm for herself. So basically, he kind of got the whole thing wrong. Now, what's interesting to me here is, did Bolvar know that much about the Jailer, right? And did Bolvar think that the Jailer's agent was going to go and become the new Lich King to enact the Jailer's, Lich King plan? I think this is an interesting thing, because if the machinery of death had not been broken, then it would make sense for Sylvanas to be the Lich Queen and to try to do Wrath of the Lich King too, but actually win this time. But with the machinery of death broken, all of the people who died in Azeroth got zooped into the Maw and turned into, Maw soldier dudes. And I suppose also, when the machinery of death breaks, every single thing that dies in the entire World of Warcraft cosmos goes into the Maw. So now the situation is, and this is actually canonically the true facts, is that the Jailer's army is larger than the Legion's because he zooped up all this death energy in his big Maw whirlpool. So think about it, right? You could do the Lich King plan, or you could shatter the Veil Between Worlds and use your larger than the Legion army to take Azeroth. So you can see how maybe at one point the plan would have been for Sylvanas to be the Lich King, Queen, but then you can see how the Jailer would modify his plans because seemingly his agents who broke the machinery of death were able to make that plan happen. So there you go. Basically, Bolvar wasn't really aware. And of course, if you want more of the lore there, we did our big Lich King episode where you really do see, and of course there was part 2 of it came out yesterday, you can check that out too, where it really just does go into Bolvar's sort of place in all of this, as well as the other Lich Kings. I think you'll love it if you're into the Wrath sort of type lore. So that's going on. Right, the camera zooms around, okay? We get to see various different characters like Tyrande and Thrall and Bane. Now, Tyrande, of course, we know does not get zooped up. She does go to the Shadowlands later, of course, but she doesn't get zooped up by the Mawsworn. But the Mawsworn do, of course, grab Anduin. So we end with Anduin looking at his father's grave, probably being a bit sad. I do have to wonder there, is that foreshadowing that, of course, he will meet his father because Varian died before the machinery of death broke, just like Vol'jin did, just like Ursoc and Ysera did. So he's floating around there somewhere. So, could that cinematography and just the fact that they decided to place Anduin near the grave of his father, could that be calling up that he'll probably have a reunion? I would say almost certainly, because it just makes sense. And it's Varian. People will be very excited when Varian comes back. But anyway, they swoop in, they yank Anduin away, he's zooped up into the sky, and that's that. Apart from poor Gen Greymane, the angry man who never gets to do anything. What a poor guy. I mean, it's a bit weird because Bolvar's talking about how Sylvanas is like trying to, grab the people that really just messed up her plans. But of course, Gen messed up Sylvanas' plans thoroughly in Stormheim. And it's a bit weird that she didn't grab Gen. Now, on that, I did have another thought I wanted to share with you on what the Stormheim situation actually meant. Because we still don't know exactly what Sylvanas' Stormheim plans and ultimate ambitions were, and what the Lantern would have actually done. Now, overtly, what we thought was that subjugating Aegir would mean that she could get more Valkyr, which would help her people. But I would also say the sort of new angle to that lore is that if Aegir is subjugated, then that's a major figure of death on Azeroth that, the Jailer would then have control over. So if you subjugate Aegir and then you take out Bolvar, and Bom Samdi's not really that powerful, you can sort of see that was maybe the Jailer's plan, and that's what got scuffed by Gen. But anyway, per Gen. The man is stuck in a loop. He doesn't really do anything to help Anduin, which is a bit weird, but I think this is the 4th time that Gen has basically looked in the camera and screamed Sylvanas, because I'm pretty sure he did it whenever she killed his son, and there's 2 other times he did it, or 1 other time, and then of course during the Legion cinematic, he also shouted Sylvanas, and yeah, there you go. The last of Gen in Shadowlands seemingly is him just screaming Sylvanas, and maybe we'll see him again in the future. I actually do think we will see him again in the future because Blizzard have done some serious teasing of future alliance intrigue and stuff like that. And yeah, if that does happen, I think based on how some of the things are established, yes, that Gen would have quite a role there. So that's what's up. Let's move on though to less good news. Okay, so this is something that we covered over on our news channel, but basically to get you up to speed, as we all know, the French Blizzard office is closing down, and you might think that's like a small regional office. No, that is Blizzard's European headquarters. Well, what the update is that the union called for a strike on the 14th. Now, the union document, the actual call to strike, is what gives us some interesting information. So, supposedly, staff always believed that the office would be closed, but Blizzard reportedly denied that to them, but of course it closed regardless. Now, suffice to say, I do think the majority of staff and the sort of, talk around the staff was that Blizzard obviously wanted to close that office and get rid of the whole lot of them. But yes, technically speaking, some people could have been surprised by this, and that is something that is called out in the call to strike. Also, it does call out that these are redundancies being made during COVID and that is a bit egregious. Now, you might think it's hard times, some companies have got to do this, but of course, within the context of the games industry, gaming is done incredibly well. The Shadowlands expansion is actually tracking very, very well, according to Activision's earnings calls, and just look at the Activision Blizzard stock. Right? It's approaching all-time highs. It's been doing very, very well. So the real cold, hard economic argument doesn't really ring true. And there may be a reason, at least there is definitely a reason that the union speculates, as to why they're closing it, and we'll get onto that in a little bit. Now, apparently Blizzard also tried to do another jobs cut in March of 2020, but that was actually blocked. So in response to all this, of course, there was hashtags appearing, and many of those were led by EU creators. Now, Here's the situation, and this is the sort of thing where if you don't work with Blizz, you probably wouldn't notice it as much, and certainly if you're an English-speaking person in the EU, or like in the EU region, you probably wouldn't be aware of this stuff, but basically, there's a lot of just rumors and expectation that whenever Blizzard, and this is reportedly what they want to do, move to an Activision Blizzard King, of course King is Candy Crush and stuff, a smaller hub that is based in London, and a lot of the non-English speaking EU creators are worried that that will mean that their support will pretty much be gone, and that's something that is being mirrored by their communities. Because one of the things that the French Blizzard office did do was provide community support for, the Italians and the Spanish and the Germans, everyone, right? The main sort of languages within the EU region. So there's a lot of worry that will not be a thing. And this, of course, did lead to a sit-down protest in Orgrimmar, which, of course, was a lot in, solidarity for the staff who were involved. Now, in terms of other things, the union themselves allege that this is a move mainly to avoid EU tax, and that it's not really related to just standard, times are tight, we've got a penny pinch, and, downsize. Of course, that's a situation where the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, so if Blizzard's, presence was, of course, in the UK, then their tax situation would be a bit different. Is the UK tax going to be more competitive than the EU? I don't know. I've not researched any of that, but certainly that is what the union are suggesting is going on. Now, there's also something that's decently worrying, I would say. They are alleging that management downgraded the quality of life at the office to the point where basically a French thing was invoked. So if you just look at what's on the screen, right? I did a quick Google search, and it seems like this is basically an official notice that you can give under French labor code of conditions that are damaging to well-being. So that's going on is not a good thing. Now, for this overall, my take is that there's a few angles here. This is an office where I think it was always underfunded, underrespected, and underused by Blizzard. And basically, it's worth understanding that Blizzard themselves have generally been stuck in 2008 in how they actually operate as a business, especially as compared to, say, high-res studios, Smite and Paladins, a bunch of other games, and just most companies that are running live games do a better job of community and are a bit more agile than Blizzard are. Basically, Blizzard never got with the times, and that's something that I think was sort of felt quite a lot. Working with sort of WoW stuff versus working with brands who are sponsors and stuff, always hilarious. Now, this is never the fault of the Blizzard staff, who are always excellent. But basically, it was always so obvious that they were never given the time and the budget they actually needed to do stuff. And that's even in a situation where the EU team were actually doing some fairly innovative things, shaking stuff up. But it just felt like throughout that, they were never really given the proper control and respect that they really deserved. So to me, it's no surprise that this is kind of happening, because it felt like the French headquarters was always kind of playing second fiddle to things, which is sad. Just Blizzard not getting things I've repeated this story before, but I've got a pretty verified story of internal PR being over the moon at a few Polygon articles, while at the same time they were totally undervaluing and basically brushing off organic community traffic, that stuff that actually moves the needle and is important to WoW players. I'm not going to name specifics there, but it's just one of those things where, you see it and you sort of think, wow, that's stuck in the past. Like in 2008, where what you really wanted was a PC Gamer front page issue for your game instead of, organic community stuff. Also, they had pretty absurd budget allocations. And now this is the stuff that was never the fault of the French office. But, we did our series on the main World of Warcraft channel for, you know, the one we did, right? The sort of beginner's WoW guide on the WoW channel. We did that mainly for awareness and publicity because the actual pay rate from Blizzard was like literally minimum wage tier. It actually would have been below minimum wage originally. Like we would have been doing it at a loss until I basically was just like, no, I'm going to need 60 to 80% more to do this at minimum. And, you know, that had to be escalated. Eventually did get there. And I only bring this up because A, it's after the fact significantly, but more importantly, it shows how like the EU community team and their initiatives, which were often really good, were just sort of underfunded and underrespected by Blizzard. Now, when it actually is a situation where the EU community team is able to do things they want to, they are great. Getting press kits, always great. You know, getting interviews, getting set up with all of that stuff. Beta keys, man, they were so on the ball with beta key giveaways and just a whole bunch of those initiatives. So whenever they had the resources, they were able to be so good. And it just does make you think, wow, it's such a pity that Blizzard just completely seems to have just underfunded and underrespected that bunch of really, really great people. So under past Blizzard, that office had always been a bit sort of stuck in the past. That's just a thing where I always just got the feeling where the excellent staff of that office never got the resources they needed and stuff like that. And they did try to innovate on stuff where they could. And personally, I've always have actually liked working with them. I mean, I'm not going to get into too much more detail on this stuff. I mean, it's the sort of thing I sort of say because at the end of the day, you know, we have our eggs in many different baskets. I do not need to get press kits and beta key giveaways and things like that for us to be running a decent ship here. So I'm sort of okay to say these things, really. And on that, I will actually say I've always suspected, and this is mainly like for the EU team because I mean, they're the ones I've always dealt with, but I have always respected how Blizzard have sort of kept ties with me, even, you know, giving me a game director interview, even while I've been very critical of the game. And I will definitely say there's companies like Bethesda and, you know, there's a lot of gaming companies that run blacklists that old school Blizzard like didn't. You could be super critical to old school Blizz and they'd be a bit curmudgeon-y and stuck in the past, but they actually would be fairly reasonable, and I always did respect that. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes, if things do shift to an Activision Blizzard King office in London. Who knows there? But yes, as it stands, just thought I'd give you like a little bit of context so you, because I know a lot of, I mean, most of 40%, 47% of the audience are in, are in North America. So you guys are not going to be, you just won't have the tie to this office that the EU players and community will have. So I'm just kind of doing this to sort of give you a bit of a context of just sort of where this like finds the game and finds Blizzard. So as it stands, right, this was the Union fighting back. And overall, I mean, as much as they try, I expect that there will be massive job losses. I think that will happen. But I also think that, of course, this is happening in France. And that is where the labor code is pretty damn strong. And all of those staff will, I do believe, get very good severance packages. That said, who knows? There could be contractors who'll be left in the lurch. Just have to wait and see. But that basically is what's going on there. Sucks for the staff. And then when we pull it back to the more meta perspective, there's what we covered in a recent news episode, both on this channel and our news channel, where yes, this literally is a whole bunch of things that Blizzard used to do internally, even if I do believe they mismanaged them a bit. Those things are being moved over to a unit that is far more directly under Activision Blizzard King, as opposed to under Blizzard Entertainment, the separate business unit. So we're thinking about that, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, look, this is the news that happened, right? Yes, it might put a dampener to our woo, hype, pre-patch video, but at the end of the day, this stuff's also important to cover too. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Of course, if there are updates, I will share them with you. And then just to round off this video, I'm going to talk about what I'm doing for the next while. So basically, our big focus right now is class content. And I mean, if you've been listening to Mike preach, that is as well, you'll know that anybody who's been trying to do class content and betas just had this weird problem of when do we actually pull the trigger and do it? It now seems like it is actually the time to pull the trigger and do it. So personally, that's what me and Matt on our team are going to be really focusing on. Should be a lot of fun. What I'd love to do on live, if I can actually get the time to play live, and I'm not doing sort of more researchy things for videos, is I'd love to get a Warlock and a Shadow Priest up to max level. And also, while doing that, test out various parts of cattle leveling, as I sort of hinted at in the leveling guide. So that would be really fun. And it's that thing where, I mean, do I already have a level 110 Priest and Warlock? Yes, but they are Horde and they're on a different server. And that means it's really bloody expensive to get them over to Ravencrest, where I actually play now on Alliance. So yeah, I'm thinking I'm just going to save the money because it will cost like 50 quid a character, which is ridiculous. That's so expensive, Blizz. Come on, guys. And I'm just going to try to level those characters up myself. So hard to say if I'll actually get to doing that. It's very bizarre for me being, I kind of had this thing where I went from being super caster, not really caster, hunter, I was a hunter main for the longest time. And yeah, I went from that to like being very melee focused and the demon hunter, which it was like, I was sitting there being like, ha ha ha, I'm mashing some buttons, I've got good corruptions, I'm doing good damage, I guess, maybe, but it just didn't, I didn't feel ownership over any successes I had when I was playing the Demon Hunter. I don't say that to, be mean to Demon Hunters, of course. But yeah, it's interesting now. The more I play Shadowlands stuff, the more I'm actually feeling in a more ranged mood. We'll have to see. I still have not settled on my main, which, believe me, is much to the chagrin of my guild, who really do want to have a raiding roster locked in. But I have told them I'll be ranged DPS, so I suppose that's probably what I will be. But when I do a choosing a main video, I will do a melee pick as well, because I don't want to leave you out. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you want to support the team that's going to be making all of the big tasty content, I mean, hey, it's Patreon. We've got our spooky October spooks. We've got some fun special we've sort of resurrected from a year ago. And of course, the pin which I have misplaced. That is it for me. That's, of course, the way to support what we're doing and also get some pretty cool stuff in return. So I think it's a pretty good situation. Thank you very much for watching. And with that said, I'll see you next time.